It, released in 2017, brings Stephen King's terrifying story of Pennywise and the Losers Club to a new generation. Set in the town of Derry, Maine, the film blends supernatural horror with a coming-of-age story as a group of children confront an ancient creature that uses their deepest fears against them. With Bill Skarsgård's unsettling performance as Pennywise, strong chemistry among the young cast, and themes of trauma, friendship, and fear, it became one of the most successful and widely discussed horror films of its era.
And welcome back to another episode of So You Like Horror. And it's me, it's Dante. And we're going to be flying solo this week. It just felt like, I don't know, it just felt like doing it alone. Going alone myself this week. Sarah's been kind of busy. It also, I guess scheduling got a little weird. Last episode we did kind of a quick catch up with Phil. So that was really nice. It was good to have him over. And it didn't really give me a whole lot of time to prep Sarah. Like, Sarah's been working 6 nights a week for the last month or so. So she's hardly getting any rest. So I didn't want to have her sit down and watch a movie and then now having to go over notes with me and then recording all this stuff. So such is life. It's me. And then also, too, again, I can reach out to people, but there are times I just feel like people have busy schedules, people have lives, they have families, and I don't want to encroach on anyone's time. So I was like, you know what, I'll do it alone. And it's fine doing solo episodes. And it's also nice to have the 2-person episode as well. So that way you kind of have a discussion, a back and forth, but just to make things go quicker and kind of get business out of the way, I want to run it alone. So for this episode, what we're going to be doing, since we recently did the Welcome to Derry episode, and I really liked it. I honestly didn't really give a damn about Pennywise until I actually watched Welcome to Derry. I got really into it. So because of that, I wanted to stay in this world. I wanted to discuss the 2017 version of it. Because obviously with Welcome to Derry, it's directed by the same director for the 2017 version, Andy Muschietti. And I figure, you know what, let's just go. And honestly, I think next episode, I'm going to do it chapter 2. And then we'll kind of get back to our theme of the year of TV shows. I think it's supposed to be True Blood. So I'm honestly just trying to delay it because though I did like the first 3 seasons of True Blood, like that 4th and 5th one was kind of tough. So trying to get through it is one of those things where it's like, ugh. But we'll cross that bridge, when we get there. Anyhow, as I mentioned, the 2017 version of it was directed by Andy Muschietti. Muschietti? I think it's Muschietti. And as we all probably know, it was adapted from the Stephen King novel, It. And the story follows 7 children who discover that Derry's history of disappearances is actually all connected to an ancient creature that feeds on fear. So even though, like, Pennywise is the movie's most recognizable figure, the story itself is, like, equally focused on the trauma of the children and their childhood, basically. Isolation, friendship, and really, like, it's a coming of age story. So it's kind of, children confronting dangers that the adults around them kind of ignore, I guess, whether it's by choice or because they're under some sort of spell. So either way, in this episode, I'm going to give kind of a light breakdown. We're not even going to do I don't even want to say it's a breakdown. We're not doing it in order or anything. We're going to kind of talk about the characters, the themes, what we usually do here. We're going to explore the individual fears of the Losers Club compared to, just doing like a full scene by scene breakdown. We're going to talk about Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise versus Tim Curry's version of Pennywise from the 1990 miniseries that was done a little differently than the 2017 version. We'll examine Derry's passive, like, I guess, would you be passive? I guess the adults who kind of ignore. So I guess that's passive. And I'll also discuss how Welcome to Derry changed the way we view the town and its history and like Pennywise's place within all of it. So the story, like the main story, is kind of set in 1989. The film itself moves like, I guess, the original one from 1990. The story comes from like the 1960s to the summer of 1989. So with this one, it's like the change gives the movie a little bit of a recognizable late 80s identity. And being a kid who was born in 78, so like 89, I was 11. So, for me, like seeing some of it, almost kind of like watching it feels like childhood to a degree. So, you do get that late 80s identity while allowing the adult characters to kind of come back when you do your chapter 2 and catch everything up in 2019. So it all works. It all makes sense. When you look at a place like Derry, it looks on surface like an ordinary town in the U.S. But, as you go through the story again, you start seeing kids go missing. And that almost gives you this idea that something's not right. Because, folks go missing and posters are popping up everywhere. And folks are just kind of moving on with their lives. Like this shit is just old habit. Oh, kids went missing, put up another fucking sign. And they live their lives like normal. So, I don't know. Like the town of Derry isn't like just a location where Pennywise lives or dwells or whatever you want to call it. Like Derry itself seems like it's infected by the presence of the creature itself. So, that kind of gives you an idea of Derry as a character. Like the movie establishes Derry as a dangerous place by showing that violence, missing children, bullying, and neglect have all been part of the town's everyday routine. Like it's part of the culture. And the 1989 setting gives the story like a strong coming of age atmosphere and support the sense of childhood adventure. Although some of its period details can feel like designed around nostalgia, it works. Like the adventurous tone is like interrupted quite a bit by the horror, and it kind of creates a contrast between like the kids, the losers, enjoying their summer together and the tone of the town. Again, when we get to the kids, even though there's going to be a lot of fear struck there, you do still get to hear like these silly conversations amongst the kids, especially Richie. Like the kids always goofing and trying to make, well, Richie specifically trying to make light of things and making jokes. So there is a tone there. Like Derry feels, again, infected by Pennywise's presence, but like the movie also suggests that the creature may not be responsible for all of the cruelty that's going on. Like it just feeds off of the hatred, the cruelty, and all the BS that comes with it. So that's kind of how we get the town of Derry as a character in the story. So how it all opens up, this version at least, it opens in October of 1988 with Bill Denbrough, and he's helping his younger brother Georgie make a paper boat. And like I think Bill's sick, and like I guess normally he would be out there with Georgie, running around with the boat in the rain and everything. But Bill's sick, so Georgie takes the boat outside during the storm, and as it's kind of following the stream, it falls into the sewer or the storm drain or whatever. And inside the drain, Pennywise, the dancing clown, is there. And that's where Georgie meets up with Pennywise. And initially, Pennywise comes off playful and welcoming. I mean, it's a kid. So I feel like, Belle should be going off to some degree. Like, hold on. Like, clowns are already creepy as is. And this dude is in the sewer. That would be red flag number 1 and 2 for me. But whatever, Georgie's very trusting. Like, Pennywise jokes with Georgie. He offers to return the boat and tries to create kind of a sense of trust. And things quickly turn violent. Like, even when they're like laughing, ha ha ha, and everything. And then, like, when you get the captions on, it says like low growl coming from Pennywise. And basically, yeah, Pennywise bites off Georgie's arm and then drags him into the sewer. And that's kind of how you kind of kick the movie off. That opening basically establishes Pennywise as a predator that understands how to appear safe before, going off and doing predatory stuff. So, like, the Georgia sequence, it stands out as, the film's, I guess, yeah, early on at least, one of the most effective moments because it immediately, like, establishes Pennywise as both manipulative and dangerous. Like, the way that Bill Skarsgård is able to shift between a playful and almost friendly clown and then switching like that into a predator perfectly, it's unsettling. Like, that dude needs to be studied. Not just for this, like a lot of his other roles too. He's a wild boy. And this allows, again, for Pennywise to gain the trust of Georgie before, again, attacking him and ripping his arm off. So by taking the time to talk with him instead of attacking right out the gate, like, Pennywise shows that he enjoys kind of creating this fear and feeding off of it rather than simply just killing victims like immediately. It's almost like playing with your food, I guess. Like the scene, like the scene's impact comes from more than just like this sudden violence and gore. Like, it's really the destruction of innocence for Georgie and the sight of a child realizing too late that, oh shit, I done fucked up. So that's, again, such a great opening because, now you set the stage. You set the table to let us know, like, oh, this shit is fucking real. This shit is, again, unsettling. It's creepy. So now with the story, you fast forward to June of 1989. And I guess this is kind of where the movie mostly takes place. It's like, well, all of it takes place in the summer. Like, Sarah and I were talking about this earlier, and I don't know, I can't remember if they like really broke down any kind of time stuff, but I would say, obviously school's ending, and now you got your summertime. So I'm going to say no later than like July, late July, mid to late July or something. But we fast forward to the end of the school year, June of 89. It's been, about 9 months since Georgie disappeared. And Bill, his older brother, he refuses to accept, that his brother's dead. Like, he's under the belief that Georgie may have been carried into Derry sewer system. So he starts, like, mapping stuff out and trying to make a plan to go search for him. And his search for Georgie is mostly, well, I don't even want to say mostly, I mean, it's driven by guilt because he sent Georgie out, alone. Georgie wanted to go play. He couldn't because he was sick. So, there is that guilt that comes with it. And Bill can accept that he can accept Georgie's death without feeling partly responsible. And finding him becomes kind of a way to escape that guilt. Like, his grief gives him the courage, I guess, and the strength to kind of keep investigating when, everyone else are, they're afraid. But it also makes him a little reckless because, he's got blinders on. All he wants to do is find his brother. And, with that recklessness comes, it comes into play that he invites his friends along to do this too. So that puts them in danger. And Pennywise understands like this vulnerability, which is why Georgie is the most effective form to use against Bill. And we'll get more into that when I start talking about the individual fears. Because there's a certain point where Bill, he recognizes the manipulation and he's able to kind of get through that. Anytime there's an appearance by Georgie, he starts to figure it out more and more as the movie goes on. And, when he finally accepts that Georgie's gone and not coming back, that's kind of where he takes the power back from Pennywise. So that's a whole different thing. We'll get more into that later on. Like I said, we're not going to be going scene by scene. So I'm just going to jump right into the Losers Club, which is Bill's friends. And the Losers Club consists of 7 friends. Obviously, Bill being the first one I mentioned. We got Richie, who, I guess with Bill, you get kind of your leader, like your emotional leader. So that, we already kind of get a little bit of an intro to Bill. You get Richie, and so if you were here for the Welcome to Derry episode, or you watch Welcome to Derry, there's Richie in the show, and he's named after Richie. His mom was Margie. And Richie here in this movie is every bit like Richie from the show. He's the loudest and the most comedic member of the group. Like he uses jokes to kind of distract himself and others from the fear. So you get Bill, you got Richie, you got Eddie, or Eds as they calls him, and he was raised to believe that he's physically fragile and constantly at risk. And in the sequel, in chapter 2, you see that he becomes a risk, analysis or whatever. So it all kind of plays together. And I can't remember what that thing is called, where you're made to believe that you have some disease or you're always sick. Eminem rapped about it or some shit. I think his mom, something with the M. I don't fucking know. But either way, that was Eddie. And then you got Stanley Uris. He's practical. He's organized. He's uncomfortable with anything he can't explain or control. And connection to Welcome to Derry, I believe it was Teddy, his uncle, or would have been his uncle until he died. But, so you get the Uris name, kind of a long-standing connection there as well. Then we get Ben, who's the new kid. He's essentially the group's historian. Because he's the new kid and doesn't have any friends, he spends a lot of time at the library just looking up the history of Derry. And he's the one, as they're kind of talking about it all, he kind of points out that Derry's got a pattern of disappearances and even kind of breaks down the timing of it all, too. You got Beverly, the only girl in the group. And, she deals with rumors at school and, just name calling and stuff. And then also the abuse at home. And then you got Mike Hanlon, who, again, connection to Welcome to Derry. His father is Will Hanlon, and his grandfather is Leroy. And the only black kid in the group. I just always got to point that out. Like, they got one girl and one black dude. Derry doesn't really seem to have a lot of black folks anyway. Derry doesn't look like the kind of place that would have a lot of black folks. Almost kind of place that wouldn't have a lot of women either, to be quite honest. But, Mike... lives with Leroy, his grandfather, and he carries trauma related to the death of his parents. Will, and not quite sure who the mom is, but like I mentioned, we discussed Will and the Welcome to Derry episode. So basically, the friendship between the losers kind of becomes the emotional center of the movie, and like Pennywise targets them individually. Because that's the only way you can really kind of fuck with them at that point, is to kind of go after them one by one. And again, that works best because each kid kind of starts the story off feeling isolated anyway. They're all, like I mentioned, bullied, they're ignored, they're controlled, they're abused. They're treated as though something is wrong with them. And when we think about the story, when we look at the bigger part of the story, Beverly and Bill receive like some of the strongest character development, like through their struggles with abuse and grief and guilt and everything and responsibility. Whereas like Mike and Stan are like kind of underserved, like almost getting less time devoted to their like personal growth and trauma as well. But the chemistry between the cast is the most important part, because again, it makes the friendships feel natural. Like them, you know, whenever they're like casting and stuff, and you know, they kind of did a chemistry test with everyone. They did a great job with this because everything does feel natural. You know, it like that natural feel allows for humor to kind of flow through, arguments to kind of feel personal, and in the quieter moments, you know, this all like kind of adds a little bit of balance to that horror aspect of the movie. So without that connection, like the scares would feel more mechanical and just kind of manufactured, and the final confrontation would carry less emotional weight, I think. Like they really feel like a group once they realize that Pennywise, like he's been going after each of them individually, and you know, they choose to face it all like together as one. So that's kind of your nutshell explanation of the losers. Now, Ben is important because, like I mentioned, he spends a lot of time in the library. So he's kind of their historian. Like, so once like he kind of goes through all this, you know, studying, like he discovers like there's like a repeated history of tragedies, disappearances, explosions, fires, like public acts of violence, just crazy stuff like that. Oh, excuse me. I guess when I'm doing this by myself, I'm talking a lot, so I'm taking a lot of air. I gotta burp like crazy. Either way. But the history of Derry is important because it shows that Pennywise, like, he isn't the town's only problem. Like, again, like I mentioned, like the repeated disappearances, fires, murders, and what have you, reveal like that this is a community that's allowed violence to become part of the identity. And although the film introduces like the 27-year cycle, it only gives enough information to establish the pattern without fully exploring how it affects, which is why I think a series like Welcome to Derry is very important, because it expands on everything. Like you get little touches of the story when you talk about the fire at the Black Spot, you know, in 1962, and in 1935, the one gang, I cannot remember it right now for whatever fucking reason. I know it's in the notes here somewhere. But you know, you get like little touches of these things, but I think the series season 1, 2, and 3 are going to really, really flesh this all out. So, I think that's cool. And like giving Ben the role of researching the town's past helps connect him to the group as well. Because again, he's the new kid. So he doesn't really have any like real connection. Now, I think in the book, like Mike, he kind of serves as a historian, and he's going, you know, kind of talking about it, which I think makes a little bit of sense for like chapter 2, where he's the one who kind of stays behind and summons them all back too. But like transferring that responsibility from Mike also kind of reduces Mike's importance a little bit, and it takes away a major part of his character from the book. So as the losers learn about Derry's earlier tragedies, the town begins to feel, you know, almost more like complicit, because the residents, you know, of the town, they just kind of ignore it. You know, they excuse it and ultimately forget like all the suffering around them. And it remains pretty unclear whether Pennywise kind of is causing this collective forgetfulness, or that's just simply like how it rocks there. Like Derry just has this natural tendency to avoid confronting its past. But that's like that silence allows the cycle to continue. So Derry's a funky place, if you ask me. But it's in Maine. And I've never been to Maine, but I can tell you, it just seems the type of place. In fact, I don't maybe two cities in Maine we can name. Portland. And that Derry's fictional, I'm pretty sure. Portland and Augusta. I think that's the capital. So there you have it. I don't know. Without using Google, can you tell me any other places in Derry? Or, I mean, Maine? Like Derry is so, like, prominent. Like, the ideal of it is, I forget that Maine's the state, and I think Derry's the state. So, there. How you like them apples? So, whatever. But I do want to talk a little bit about, like, the individual fears that each of the losers kind of encounter as well, or that they're dealing with. Because Pennywise doesn't approach every child in the same way. Like Pennywise studies them and uses, like, different forms connected to their deepest fears, insecurities to kind of fuck with them. Like, the individual encounters, like, reveal that, the losers are already kind of living with fear before Pennywise even pops up into their lives. Like, again, when we talk about Bill, like, Bill's guilt over Georgie's death is, stronger than his fear of Pennywise, because he believes he failed his younger brother by letting him go outside alone. And when I even really think about that, I mean, our family history has kind of a somewhat similar story with my mom and a younger sibling. A clown didn't come out of a sewer and fucking bite her arm off, but, like, we got, some wild shit too. Detroit, a wild place. Not like Derry, though. Both start with a D, so I don't know. But even when, like, Bill understanding that Georgie's, like, any time that he sees Georgie, it's a trick. He continues to follow him because he can't let go of the possibility that his brother might still be alive. And Pennywise uses that, that guilt to manipulate him. And, it turns Georgie into Bill's, like, emotional weakness, I guess. So for Bill to truly stand against Pennywise, he's got to accept that Georgie's gone and recognize that the creature can't give him the reunion or forgiveness he wants. And that's actually kind of touched on a little bit in Welcome to Derry as well. When we get to Beverly, she's experiencing, she's going through puberty. So the one big scene for her was, like, she sees blood erupting from her bathroom sink, and when she calls her, or her dad comes in to check on her, we see that she's covered in blood. The room's covered in blood, and he can't see it at all. And the scene connects her fear of puberty with the threat of abuse inside her home. Like, her father's behavior becomes, like, even worse and more threatening as the movie kind of goes on, and it makes Beverly's home, like, one of the least safe locations like in the movie. Like that bathroom scene connects, that horror of Pennywise with, like, real fears that she faces while going into adolescence, I guess. And the blood pouring from the sink reflects her anxieties around puberty and the loss of childhood innocence. And the book goes into some other shit about all that, the innocence and then being children and becoming adults. This ain't the place, though. So, but it's yuck. But yeah, like, basically, she's got anxieties about the loss of childhood innocence, and her father's inability to see what she's seeing, like, it kind of reinforces how completely he ignores her mental distress. Like, and even when the other losers come over to help her clean up, like, they can see it. Like, I think Richie, like, made a comment. He was like what, like, is it because you guys are virgins that you can see this and I can't? Some bullshit like that. But Richie just be saying Richie shit. So, but yeah, like basically the kids can see it. But again, it feels like the adults just, again, aren't included in the party of Pennywise, I guess. And although Pennywise frightens her, like her father may be scarier for her because he represents abuse inside the one place where, she should feel safe, which is at home. Like Beverly's like storyline gives the movie some of its strongest emotional material, although this, the seriousness of her situation kind of, it does deserve more like development and more time and sensitivity. But I guess like to be able to kind of spread the story relatively evenly, you'd spend a whole lot of time there because there's a lot to unpack. I was actually saying to Sarah, and I mean, this is more so after the movie. It was like, I think it's like ID Dark, comic book company. They've been doing like a lot of movie adaptation, like comic books. Like they have Return to Sleepy Hollow. They have a Quiet Place books. They have some Event Horizon sequels and stuff. It would be interesting to see them kind of give us the time between after the losers kind of wrap up in 1989 and what's going on in their lives leading up to, Pennywise's return. Because there's a lot of backstory with all this. There's a lot of stuff unresolved, I think. Anyhow, that's again neither here nor there. So we go to Eddie, and like much of Eddie's fear is mostly been created and reinforced by his mother, who has raised him to believe that he's constantly sick, he's fragile, and he's in danger of everything. And once he learns out that his medication is fake, like that becomes an important turning point because it forces Eddie to recognize that like any limitations controlling his life aren't really like, they're not real. Like his mother uses fear as a way to keep him dependent on her, and making her another example of an adult in Derry who harms a child under the excuse of protection. As Eddie begins questioning what he's been told, he slowly learns to separate genuine threats from fears that have been manufactured for him. And this allows him to become more independent and like kind of boost that courage, I guess. At the pharmacy when he's picking up his medication, and one girl, says, it's all bullshit. You're taking placebos. And then he says to his mom, these are gazebos, which is a common, I guess, mistake for a kid because it sounds similar. So, yeah. And then for Stanley, like Stan's fear of like this distorted woman and a painting at his father's synagogue, like it's I don't know why I'm stumbling right now, but this fear is effective because it represents more than a frightening image. Like Stan depends on order and predictability. So the painting disturbs him because it appears to violate the rules of reality. Like it's not, what you would look at as typical, I guess, art by his viewpoint or his eye. So his fear is not only that the creature might attack him, but that the world may contain things he can't understand or control. Like this need for structure separates him from the other losers who are more willing to accept that Pennywise is real and confront the impossible, while the movie kind of communicates this aspect of Stan's personality. Like he receives like less development than several other members of the group, and this kind of leaves him like, I guess, kind of his emotional struggles somewhat unexplored, and it's sad because I mean when we get to chapter 2, that goes a little bit deeper for him, and yeah, I'm definitely going to do it chapter 2. I'll be a little bit less, I guess, jittery and all over the place, then I'll be better prepared, y'all. I promise. Scout's honor. Now, when we get to Richie uses humor as both a defense mechanism and a form of courage. It sounds familiar. I'll be doing that shit in jiu-jitsu when I'm getting my ass whipped. I'll be out there laughing and cracking jokes. Meanwhile, I'm scared as shit. Like, I'm terrified. But I be doing it. What y'all doing? Nothing. Y'all ain't got the heart to step on those mats. Come see me behind the bowling alley, son. What's up now? Anyhow, his constant joking helps him to avoid showing how scared he is, and how he's really feeling. But it also allows him to keep moving when fear might overwhelm him. So Pennywise targets Richie's identity by showing him like a missing person poster with his own face. And that fucks with him. It fucks with him big time. It forces him to kind of confront the possibility of disappearing and being forgotten while, the room filled with, he's also scared of clowns, so, the room being filled with like clown figures and everything, it's obviously the most obvious fear for him. But there's also that underlying of like being forgotten, which is why, when you get to chapter 2, he becomes a stand-up comedian. If you're a good one, most people ain't going to forget you. So I'm sure that ties in there somewhere, talk to a therapist, they'll figure it out. But the humor doesn't necessarily weaken the tension like for him, because it makes Richie's panic feel more believable. Like he jokes because he needs that distraction. And, amongst the losers, Richie may be the most dependent on emotional deflection, like because he's using comedy to maintain control and keep the others from seeing how afraid he really is. When we get to Ben, like his knowledge of Derry, it gives him a better understanding of the danger surrounding the town, but it also makes him more vulnerable because he starts recognizing patterns that most people have been ignoring. Like Pennywise uses Derry's violent history against him by turning the information that he discovers into something immediate and kind of like right there, like more terrifying, if you will. And then Ben's loneliness is another thing that makes him more willing to connect with the losers, since they offer him like friendship and belonging, like, and that's something he's been missing. I mean, they encounter him after he gets roughed up by what's the fucking bully name? Bowers, Henry Bowers. So there's a connection there off that, and then also again, he's the historian. Like his research also represents like one of the first genuine threats to Pennywise, possibly. Because understanding the creature's history helps the group see that their experiences are connected and that the cycle can be confronted. So, and then we got Mike. And for Mike's like storyline, it connects his personal, I guess, history and trauma with Derry's larger history of violence. But, the movie doesn't give him enough time to fully process it. Pennywise uses visions of fire and the deaths of his parents to kind of take advantage of his grief, while Mike also faces racist, abuse from Henry Bowers and the broader hostility surrounding him. Like, this allows his story to kind of blend like the horror with the real world, like horror of racism to some degree. And I don't really think it's too like in your face necessarily, but it's there, to some effect, and this shows how Pennywise feeds on fears already created by the town. Like, although again, Mike's role is noticeably like reduced from the movie because again, he was a historian, so in the book. This gets kind of handed off to Ben, and it kind of cuts down on him. And I think he deserves like, I think he deserves like a little bit more. At least kind of get a little bit better understanding, because I mean he's been there, his parents have been there, so it's almost kind of like there should be more to dig into. So I don't know, by transferring most of that like historian responsibility to Ben, like the film does limit Mike's development and kind of weakens his connection to the town's history, which again, as you watch Welcome to Derry, it feels like there's got to be a stronger connection there, just given what you see there. Now, I do want to talk about Henry Bowers, as I did mention him. He was the town bully. Like, Henry and his friends terrorize these kids throughout the movie. Like, it's almost like to a point where, like, like his violence becomes like more and more extreme, like as it goes on, like to the point where he kills his dad. But like Pennywise's influence like just escalates that. Like it's almost like he's a puppet. Like he's already cruel and unstable before Pennywise like intervenes. Like his dad humiliates him and embarrasses him, in front of his friends, and like it kind of continues a pattern of adults passing fear and violence down to children. Like Henry can be viewed as both a victim of Derry's cycle, and someone responsible for his own cruelty as well. Like his abusive, father just again helped shape that anger and need for control, while Pennywise kind of pushes those violent impulses further, like along, rather than creating them, because it's already there. That anger's already like there, so he's not creating this from nothing. So by placing a human bully alongside a monster, like the movie shows that evil in Derry doesn't always need a paranormal explanation. Like Henry's scary because people like him can't exist without Pennywise, and his story kind of shows how abuse and humiliation can pass from adults to children, allowing violence to repeat, like from one generation to the next. So, and we see this like in the real world. I mean, at least I remember seeing it growing up. I mean, I was almost part of that cycle. I mean, the shit that I went through, and then like many years as a kid into my teens, I was kind of a fucking dick. So fortunately, I realized, people don't want to be friends with you if you bite them. So I was like, maybe I should stop, hitting people. And now I have friends, like all two of them. So yeah, as the story kind of progresses in the ideal of characters, I also want to talk about location. Neibolt, and like every time I hear them say it, I know they're saying it right, but then I read it as Neibolt, Neibolt, Nabolt. It doesn't matter. But like this sequence, it like in the movie when they get there, because they trace everything down to 29 Neibolt Street, and like they had the projector set up in the garage, and they're looking at everything kind of traced there. But like this, like this might be like one of the strongest like horror set pieces in the entire movie, because it combines like all of the losers' individual fears with their first real attempt to fight back against Pennywise. Like Pennywise appears like really like surprised when the children resist, like like they're fighting back, and it kind of suggests that the creature had it's kind of underestimating them, like at least the power of friendship, if you will. Like even though they kind of make it out of this encounter, like the group of friends, they all kind of they don't come out unscathed. They all kind of quickly fall apart because like this experience leaves them injured, scared, emotionally fucked up. And, Pennywise might be like kind of now pushing that division because, like, look, they stood up to me, but kind of that cycle of fear and violence and everything, no one's impervious. So, I think also the conflict shows that, their friendship is still fragile because even though you had the 4 friends initially, kind of coming up together, you got the other 3 that's new to the group. Like that friendship hasn't really been tested yet. So, as we go through though, this is how it builds. After, more shit goes on. Like Beverly basically has kind of a altercation with her father, and he's just a fucking gross fucking piece of shit. But yeah, after this encounter, she gets kidnapped or taken by Pennywise and I guess held captive in the sewers. And he chooses Beverly because she's kind of that emotional linchpin for the group. Like Ben's the emotional leader, and he's got a lot of emotion, specifically because of Georgie. But when it comes to the entire group, there's an emotional vulnerability here when it comes to Bev. So I think that's why Pennywise chooses to go after her and kind of making her, I guess, the ideal target to draw, the friends all back together and into the sewers. Like her abduction may be intended to weaken them by removing one of their strongest members too. But ultimately, like it kind of has the opposite effect by giving them a shared reason to reunite. Like she does become more passive during the final act, like especially after being trapped by the deadlights, which is, she's like a strong character, but it does feel kind of like disappointing considering how independent and capable she has been throughout the rest of the movie. And she gets awakened by Ben's like kiss, and it's kind of framed as a fairy tale moment and everything, and it reflects like his romantic feelings like towards her. But the rescue is also rooted in the larger bond between all of them, showing that both like friendship and affection helped like bring her back. So as we kind of talk about them rescuing Bev, yeah, I know I skipped over a whole lot of shit to get here, but here we are. It's a solo episode, so we're not doing 2 hours. It's just me. So I'm giving you what I can give you. But basically, now you get your kind of final confrontation here in the sewers, and it becomes more physical than psychological with the kids attacking Pennywise all together. But that violence represents their decision to stop allowing fear to control them. So when Pennywise offers to spare the group in exchange for Bill, like their refusal kind of proves that their friendship is much stronger than the creature's attempts to isolate and manipulate them. Like they don't like permanently like defeat it. Instead, they kind of deprive Pennywise of the fear it needs to, kind of hold its power and feed. Like Bill recognizes this kind of reversal when he tells Pennywise that it's now it's basically explaining to Pennywise that like you're afraid, you're the one that's scared now, bitch. And by standing like together and like just being united and refusing to see Pennywise or the creature as unstoppable, they fuck it up. They injure and weaken it enough to force it back into hibernation. So whether Pennywise withdraws because it's physically hurt or genuinely scared, or simply just kind of again going into hibernation and waiting to come back for its next cycle, that's uncertain. But the confrontation does prove that it can be challenged. So with that being what it is, the kids win. They like Guardians of the Galaxy, the power of friendship always fucking wins. It defeated fucking Ronan. It defeated fucking Pennywise. And here we are. So, some of the note here, just talking about Pennywise in itself, like Bill Skarsgård's like Pennywise stands out. Like it's almost more recognizable to me now. I guess because it's all over the place now. But it stands out because he feels less like a human clown and more like an ancient creature attempting to like imitate a clown. Like he has like an unsettling appearance. Like his expressions just shift. Like they're uneven. Like he has, I think in real life he can like make his eyes wander. Like, so those fucking Skarsgård's kids. I mean, there's like there's more of them than there are the fucking Arquettes and the Wayans. Like and then they have like another little one. And I don't even know if they're like fucking making babies themselves, but either way it goes. He's the one. He's just fucking unsettling. He was perfect for the role. Like he had like unpredictable movements, and that made him kind of like fucking weird, and it just, I don't know. But yeah, the visual effects that they use, they used a lot of CGI with this. It did help expand on Pennywise's abilities, especially during his transformations. And though some moments do feel a little overly dependent on CGI, and some of that takes attention away from like Skarsgård's like performance. Like Pennywise, it still works. Like it's still scary. Like he's, I would say, I guess he's most disturbing when, he kind of speaks calmly, because there's this controlled voice and playful behavior like behind it all that creates tension before the violence starts. It's like the calm before the storm, I guess. And like, you see that early on, especially with Georgie, like like the switch up where like he's giggling and laughing, and he just goes into, he just drops it. He just drops a smile almost like instantly. So yeah. Now I do think like the movie, it may show Pennywise a little too frequently, which is what I did enjoy about Welcome to Derry. I think the first 4 episodes, we don't get Pennywise until like the end of the 5th episode. So, I do think here in the movie we do get quite a bit of Pennywise, and making some of the later appearances of him less effective, when it comes down to like the final like battle scenes and everything. But scenes like, again, Georgie's encounter at the storm drain, I think it best captures his interpretation of Pennywise by, again, creating that false friendliness and childlike humor, and then suddenly switching gears to, Predator. So, in terms of like comparing the two Pennywises, I watched the 1990 version of it like when I was younger, and I didn't really fucking care for it. And I actually just had this discussion recently at the gym. I was talking to one of my teammates, and I was just like, wow, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I did so much so that I didn't even remember. But to be fair, even when I first watched this one, I was just going through the motions. I turned the movie on, I watched, I was like, okay, hey, clowns, boo. Like I mentioned earlier, after watching Welcome to Derry, I really kind of got into it. I even got a fucking Pennywise figure over there on my shelf now. So that for me, just it's like, okay, you did it. That show did it, and I'm invested. Like, so who knows? Maybe I'll go back and revisit the 1990 version of it. But as far as like comparison of the two clowns, I mean, Tim Curry's like Pennywise is more like, I guess, conversational and theatrical, using, a lot more humor and sarcasm and kind of mockery to fuck with the victims. So, and he looks like a familiar clown, like he looks like a basic circus clown. Like he initially appears approachable, which makes that, the cruelty beneath that friendly appearance seem more disturbing. So, but you're also limited with the time with what you can do with effects. So I almost feel like it's kind of an unfair comparison. I mean, you're going to have people with the nostalgia and the memories of like, yeah, Tim Curry's is the better one. Meaning, I'll admit I'm a victim of the moment. So I like Skarsgård's version. I mean, again, his feels less like a human clown and more like a predator, like an ancient predator attempting to imitate a fucking clown. Like it's very unsettling because it's like, well, look, I've seen this before, so I'm going to try to imitate it. Like his unpredictable movements and like his unnatural expressions, it like emphasizes like the entity's animalistic and supernatural, like, I guess, qualities. And again, they do rely heavily on CGI, but I do think that helps kind of build on the character. And that could be why a lot of folks are like, well, I like Tim Curry's better because, they didn't have like the CGI to like kind of build around it. But either way it goes, they're both fine for what they are. So I do want to talk a little bit more real quick before we get out of here about the adults in Derry and just how kind of they suck, and then go through some of the themes, and then we'll get the fuck out of here. And some of the points about the adults in Derry, the adults just seem to exist. It's almost like they're under a supernatural influence, and it's between that and then just kind of a deliberate ignorance. Like some of the adults genuinely appear unable to see the shit going on around them, while others notice it and they just choose not to intervene. Like the children recognize like the truth because, they're the ones directly experiencing it, and they haven't yet learned to accept Derry's violence as normal. Like, whereas the adults, that shit's like old habit to them. Like, and this makes parental failure like kind of a central part of the movie, like part of the like just the horror of it all, because Pennywise survives like by frightening children, and when no one's believing them, it gets scarier. So by being in that town, no one's protecting them. It just kind of builds on that fear. So Derry's habit of forgetting, the victims, it allows that cycle to continue, almost as though the town itself is protecting the creature itself. So I don't know. After watching Welcome to Derry, like it feels less accidental and more like a part of a long-standing pattern in which Pennywise's influence encourages everyone to ignore and just forget the evil around them. So that's kind of how I look at those grown-ups. They suck. So as we go through the themes, as I always like to do with movies, we got fear. It is kind of the biggest one. Fear as a source of power, specifically. Like Pennywise doesn't create every fear experienced by the kids. Like instead, like he identifies like what's fucking with them. A fear that's already there, or trauma that's already there, or an anxiety that's already there. Like something that's already present in their life. Sorry, I'm like fighting off a burp here. There, it went out. But it like he's kind of like taking anxieties that already exist in their lives, and he turns those feelings into physical threats. So, using fear as a power, like, or fear, as like a power source, it is huge. The film also shows that fear is not limited to, just the supernatural, as characters like, Eddie's mom and Beverly's father and Henry Bowers, himself and his father, they use different like by forms of control, whether it be illness, intimidation, or humiliation, to kind of keep control over other folks. And in that sense, Pennywise represents both fear itself and the people who benefits from keeping others frightened, in that pocket. Another thing that we have here is isolation versus friendship. Like the movie shows that Pennywise separates its victims because fear is stronger when someone feels alone and unsupported. Like the kids, they don't completely eliminate their fears through friendship, but they become more capable of confronting them together. Like it's almost kind of like, you got my back, I got your back type of deal. And, we're going to fight this out together. Like within that group, like each kid kind of receives the understanding that, there's a loyalty and protection and acceptance that they were missing, at home or at school or wherever. And that friendship kind of gave them a safe place to be believed and to work together. And this weakens Pennywise's ability to control them. So, again, that isolation is a hell of a drug for Pennywise, but that friendship, that's a fucked up antidote for him too. Now, trauma, specifically childhood trauma, is another big theme here, where the movie kind of handles trauma most effectively when the supernatural horror grows directly, from what the characters are already kind of going through. Like specifically with Beverly's abusive home life, or Bill's like guilt over Georgie, and Eddie's fear of being sick. These are things that are, traumatic, and that carries over into adult life. So, trauma is a serious thing. And at times, like the movie does kind of reduce like some more complicated issues. Like, again, when we mentioned Beverly, and you can even kind of go into Bill's grief. It is kind of the driving emotional force of the movie, but it still kind of feels like, there's a lot more that could be done. And I know like that could be said for any movie, there's more that could be done, in hindsight, but either way, it skips over like certain anxieties. And then again, we mentioned Mike, how a lot of everything with him is just like kind of pushed to the side because, just however they crafted the story. But like that trauma, it carries. And Pennywise's transformations give a lot of those internal struggles and traumas a physical form, allowing like us viewers to kind of see that fear, to see that shame, to see the trauma. And, that's something that, the kids had to confront, like directly versus like just kind of having to live with it. Another theme is growing up. This is kind of a fucked up coming of age story. So, like with the kids defeating Pennywise, it can be viewed as a metaphor for them entering adulthood. Because like once they learn that fear doesn't like just disappear as they grow older, instead they have to understand it and kind of refuse to let it control them. So by confronting Pennywise, they kind of accept, the painful realities about grief and uncertainty and the dangers of the adult world. I mean, and again, we'll get to chapter 2 and, you dig more into that. But like that closeness starts changing as the summer ends because, childhood itself is changing. Like, no matter how you want to cut it. So, and, that was another thing I told Sarah, was like, and maybe I'm just missing something here, but it's just, wow, they all kind of, they kill this fucking killer clown, and then the summer ends, and it's like, all right, well, when this bitch comes back in 27 years, we'll reunite. But it's like, dog, like, I feel like there's more in between. Like, don't y'all go to school together? Well, except for Mike, I think homeboy homeschooled. Like, he's the only one that has an excuse. Everybody else, like, go to school together. Like, Y'all ain't gonna see each other through the hallways. There ain't no more story. Y'all just gonna act like, because like when you get to chapter 2 and like, you know, they're all making the phone call, or Mike's making the phone call to reconnect everybody. It's just like everybody kind of moved on with life since that summer. It's like, I just think after killing a fucking clown, you don't just not talk to your homies again. Like, that might be some shit you talk about. Like next one, like, you remember last year when we fucking killed that clown? You know? All right, that's just, sorry. Went on a little tangent there. Got a little, there's some shit I've been talking about here at the house for like the last like week and a half now. I was like, yo, they just kind of disconnected after killing the clown. That's crazy work. Anyhow, another theme, you know, we kind of go into memory or the lack thereof, or forgetting, whatever it might be. But forgetting is kind of a key point to Pennywise's survival, because it allows Derry's violence to continue without, you know, any kind of accountability. Like the folks that live there, they seem affected by the influence of Pennywise, but their silence also reflects emotional like avoidance and willingness to ignore painful like realities or truths. So by forgetting, you know, that, you know, they're missing children, or there's been like some kind of public like tragedy, or, you know, these repeated cycles of violence, like Derry creates this perfect environment for Pennywise to return unnoticed. And it's almost like he comes back and it's like, oh shit, like it's all brand new to them. And also considering that it's a 27-year cycle, I mean, you know, when we look at like Welcome to Derry and then we come to the 2017 version of it that's taking place in 89, I mean, the only one that we really know that's still there is Leroy. So, and he didn't even experience that shit like the kids experienced it. I mean, he kind of did, but kind of didn't. So it's kind of a, I guess, weird connect of sorts, but at the same time a disconnect. So yeah, and then, you know, we got our cycle of violence as our last theme, and, you know, we kind of mentioned this already. It's like beating a dead horse, I guess, to some degree. Like, you know, Pennywise always pops up like to be both a cause and a product of Derry's violence. Like, he influences the town. He's amplifying the fear. He's creating indifference, but it also thrives because those qualities already kind of exist within the community anyway. You know, like I said, they ignore shit, and this cycle of violence does continue. So each generation refuses to acknowledge the abuse and all the stuff that happened before that was taking place around them. And this allows the same patterns to continue. And it almost kind of sounds like, you know, the fucking real world that we live in now, when we see a lot of this dumb bullshit. Anyhow, but as long as, like, you know, these people, you know, continue to avoid confronting the past, the cycle can't really be broken. So Pennywise, you know, he's always going to continue to repeat and return and, you know, create fucking chaos. So, you know, whatever it may be. So yeah, yeah, I guess some of the final notes I have here is like, it's, you know, the connection to Welcome to Derry. We obviously know the connection. I mean, like I mentioned, like we had Mike, whose dad was Will, and his grandfather's Leroy. We got Richie, whose mom is Margie. I guess, you know, as we move further back into other seasons, in season 2, I believe, is going to go to 1935, and season 3 will be 1908. It might even kind of pick up further on other stuff that we heard or that were mentioned in it, and in it chapter 2. So, otherwise, I mean, I don't got a whole hell of a lot here. We're over an hour, and I don't really like these solo joints to go an hour like this. So let's see here what I got. Oh, some what works and some possible weaknesses here. I guess some of the scares in the movie really work. They're pretty effective. After watching it several times, it does kind of feel a little unsettling, especially because, like, when Sarah goes to work, I'm just sitting here in my room watching it in the dark. So, they built this movie around atmosphere, and, you know, that atmosphere is unsettling. And then when you just think about the character's personal fears, that works too. It all kind of goes well together. I think some of the stuff that doesn't work or possible weaknesses is, again, I mentioned the CGI. That's one of the weaknesses. And I mean, again, just considering its time and what have you, I get it. Even though it was 2017, I still get it. And it wasn't like tasteless. I mean, it's still kind of worked, because you got to think about like what you're dealing with here, this creature, this monster, and you want it to appear so. So yeah, you do have that. I think another possible weakness is Stan Uris's story being like kind of weakened, and Mike, his story kind of being reduced a little bit. They had less development than the other kids, and then even with Beverly, like I said, she had a lot of stuff that could have been kind of unpacked too. But then I think we go into a whole different kind of movie there, and even with Bill, so there are some things that were a little bit undercooked, but I think it was cooked, like the entire story itself was cooked just fine. It's almost like you got a good cake, but like maybe you missed a little bit of icing on the side, but the slices were still good. It still tastes delicious. So that's that. I guess when it comes to, final thoughts on it all, I don't know. I enjoyed it. The first time I watched it, like I said, was more of like, I'm just going through the motions. But after watching it, I want to say like 4 times since Thursday, it is more like, okay, I really, really, really do like, I like the world that they've created. Like, and having the same director for the show and the movie really helps, because like when you look at the movie, it everything, like it just feels like it all continues perfect. And honestly, I can't wait until the series is completed with the 3 seasons, and there's a rumor of it chapter 3 being developed as well. I'd like to watch season 3, 2, and 1, and then it chapter 2 and it chapter 3, like just do a fucking marathon of it all. That's going to be a crazy marathon, but we'll figure out how to make it work. But yeah, otherwise that's it. I'm all done. I ain't got nothing else here to offer. I guess next episode will probably be at chapter 2, and then we'll roll into True Blood. I don't know if I'm going to try to rush it and just get it out next week, or if I'm just going to wait and do it on the regular cycle that it tends to go on. But either way it goes, we're going to definitely move into chapter 2, and then get back to things. I got to reach out to Scott. I think we're going to try to do exorcism of Emily Rose in September as well. And I got some other things, because once October hits, we got 5 Fridays in October. So that's an episode every week. So that's 5 episodes. So I got to figure that content out too. But hey, we're going to make it happen. Like I said, if I had a production company, it would be called Quantity Over Quality. So I'm going to give you a whole lot, and then you're going to get a little bit of good. But it's all right. So as always, to you guys, thank you. If y'all have any questions or concerns or criticisms, always feel free to reach out. You can always find me at So You Like Horror on Instagram, where all the words are separated by underscores. Or you can email me. I check when I get these weird emails that someone's writing them with AI. It's like, oh, I really love the way that you connect this, and this, and that. And then it's like, no, you don't. You've probably never listened to an episode. Don't fucking bother me. But then again, maybe they're not good at writing. So I don't know. Either way it goes, you can always reach out to me at the email too. So you like horror@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram. It's probably the best place to reach me is on Instagram. As always, I want to, I guess I feel like I'm doing off the Mets exit here, but either way, big shout out to everyone, especially kids over there at Nerd Rage, because if it weren't for them, I wouldn't be doing any kind of podcasting. So thank you to Nerd Rage Radio. Thanks again to Phil. Like early on, when I asked Phil to do the podcast in the very beginning, he was like, well, I don't know, I'm not really a big horror guy. It's like, this man sends me horror trailers on the regular. So for someone that's not really a horror guy, you sure watch a lot of fucking horror, Phil. So yeah, so thanks though. Thank you. I do appreciate everything that Phil does. And obviously thank you to my wife, who reads the intro for all the episodes and sometimes does episodes with me. So thank you to them. I guess we could say thanks to Teresa, because this is like actually sitting down with her is where the original idea came from. Maybe we'll bring her back for episode 125. I don't fucking know. I don't know. I think, like I had mentioned over the weekend, I think I'm mad at her, but then Bobby was like, if you have to ask yourself if you're mad at them, you're probably not. So I'm probably not mad at her. So either way, thank you to everyone. We appreciate you. We love you guys. As always, you guys keep listening. We're going to definitely keep making shows. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
I think that's good for now.
The end.